This podcast is owned and operated by the RCR Association, a private third party to the Department of National Defense. The content of this podcast is the responsibility of the RCR Association and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Government of Canada. The official emblems of the regiment are used with the permission of Regimental Headquarters, the RCR. All right, hey sir, thanks for joining us today.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is an amazing pleasure. You were one of the first people who signed up for the podcast, and it's just been, kind of a mission to finally get the time together.
Yeah.
Being in your position, it's I'm sure very busy.
Yeah.
And just for everybody, I can introduce you well. Today's guest is Captain Aman Segu, who is the 3RCR Operations Officer, the opso. Many of us in the junior ranks and NCOs have heard of this position, but some of us may not fully understand what an opso does. Sir, do you mind explaining what your role is and job is?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the operations officer is a principal staff officer who reports to the commanding officer, right? So while the commanding officer commands the battalion, the operations officer is responsible for controlling those functions, working both up and down the chain of command and also with flanking units. So
this is the most senior captain role in the battalion?
Yeah,
or one of them?
It's one of them. So it's what's considered an A job, right? So it's typically one of the last jobs you'll do as a captain before getting promoted to the next rank. And the reason being is because the breadth, depth, and scope of responsibilities that come associated with the position, right? So while you're responsible for ensuring the operational readiness of the unit, making sure training objectives are met, and making sure that the battalion is doing the tasks, are doing what's assigned in accordance with what's assigned to us in the O plan. We work with flanking units to make sure we've got the right resources and making sure that reporting our remits properly higher to brigade so that we're holding up our end of the bargain in the managed readiness plan.
That's awesome, sir. And this is in the context of garrison. Does it change much when you guys deploy? And does it look any different when we go to the field or deploy in operations?
So the principles remain the same, right? So while the commanding officer commands, the operations officer would be typically in the main command post, the main CP, controlling all of the functions, right? So typically what you would see is you'd be anything from a expandable CP7 all the way down to a G-Wagon with amplified comms, right? And what you're doing is you're controlling all sorts of different functions like ISTAR, fires, the Engineer Support Coordination Center, intelligence, plans. Operations is responsible for controlling all of those functions to achieve the commanding officer's intent.
Okay, wow.
Along the spectrum of conflict.
How do you find the job?
I love it, right? So to me, it is the most tangible effect you have to making things happen in the unit. And to me, it's one of the most gratifying things you could do, other than command.
That's amazing. I've had an experience being in ops. My first deployment to Kuwait, I was in Op Impact Roto 4.
Yeah.
It was with 1RCR as the lead mounting unit, and I was the operations sergeant for the OSH. It was the base side, not the task force side. And that was interesting because in our team, operations is such a team-based organization. We had our sergeant major, we had the ops sergeant, we had a operations officer, and then we had a senior logistics operations officer, which was a new concept to me. But we were basically supporting and enabling a very rear echelon type of formation.
Yeah.
But I loved it, and I felt like I was the get shit done guy. I mean, all these tasks I need to be done and coordinated, but you are making it happen.
Yeah,
I find
and it's interesting, right? It takes years of experience, not just learning, but growing and failing, learning from those mistakes. But eventually, once you get into those critical pieces, one of those critical roles, there's the art and science to doctrine, right? So there's the science. You go read land ops, you go read battle group and ops, you read the definitions and you practice it, right? But the art comes from experience. It comes from intuition, which comes from practice, right? So you need to take all those lessons learned that you've applied over the years, you combine that with what's written in doctrine, and like you said, you get shit done. you make things happen.
And that's really trying to get as much variety of experience as being as a platoon commander, a company 2IC.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, those are like a lot of the 2 jobs I see the officers filling before. I don't see them for a long time after that because they're off going to do these other roles and jobs. But yeah, definitely that helps a lot in that kind of case, having those experiences. How big's your team?
So right now, our team upstairs, we've got, I have an ops sergeant major, I have an assistant officer, a training officer, I have an intelligence team, and I've got a training NCO and ops warrant. So all said and done, we've got a pretty robust team up there to, make things happen. Like it's an excellent team. We've had a chance to really work together over the past year to make sure the battalion is ready to hit the GRTF build next APS.
Right on.
Yeah.
Do you guys also draft orders?
We do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things I ever heard of what ops does. And it's like the CEO doesn't actually write the orders. It's the operations opso that looks after that.
Yeah, exactly. So anytime anything needs to happen within the unit, right? Like we'll take what's called the commander's CPG, commander's planning guidance. And what we'll do is we'll translate that into a written set of orders. So it's SMESC type orders, right? And what we'll do is we'll make sure that it's got, the right information and make sure it's sent out to the right people, not just within the unit, right? Because of a lot of the things we do, really it leans on folks from outside of the unit and from brigade as well. So just really making sure that that information is passed on in a timely manner. But all that said to say, yes, there's formalized orders, but there's something also to be said about, phone calls, emails, and just making sure that the communication piece is upheld at all times.
Very important. Sir, what's like something you'd want to share to people that are listening that are, young officers who may very well find themselves potentially being in this A job?
Yeah.
What is something you'd want to advise them about?
Never stop learning, right? You finish your phase training, you get to battalion, you finish platoon command time, and we're all looking to go out to the next bound, right?
What is the next bound after OPSO typically? Is it OC?
So it depends on where you're sitting at with a number of different things. But typically, if you're successful in your time as an operations officer, you can find yourself promoted to the next rank, either promoted and officer commanding of a rifle company, officer commanding of a training company at a training institution, or wherever you may find. But also all that said to say, there's a couple of other benchmarks and gateways you need to hit, such as second language training. If you need educational upgrades, sometimes that needs to happen as well. But typically, the experience you gather as an operations officer, like it translates into a variety of other functions at the next rank level.
Okay, right on. And this kind of job, like, how long do you normally hold this position?
Anywhere from a year to 2 years.
Okay.
It's funny. Like when I first came into this job, my experience in the battalion at 3RCR specifically, right? Like I'd done platoon command time, I'd done my time on the ground, I'd done my 2IC time, and it's interesting, right? Because you go from, as a platoon commander, you're worrying about anywhere between 20 to 35, 40 soldiers, right? You go to a company 2IC, you're worrying about a company's administration. You go upstairs as OPSO, like you're wrangling 5 different companies. You're wrangling 5 different subunits, making sure that everything is in line with the commanding officer's intent, and you're staying within the left and right of arc in accordance with what's written in the O plan and what you're supposed to be doing and what you're not supposed to be doing, right? So it's really a balance of effort, but what it really comes down to is your ability to manage and maintain relationships, right? So at the end of the day, positional rank, if you're exercising that, you're doing something wrong, right? Where you earn credibility in a role like this is not by demanding respect, but by commanding respect. And you do that by listening and being diplomatic and, like any good relationship, open communication.
Have you ever seen anybody mess this up? Do a bad job? Yeah, of course.
Like, hey man, I'm human. I've made my mistakes.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Me too.
But what's important is that you learn from those mistakes, and you don't repeat them because then those become habits.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I found myself, I would say that's generally this like a principle statement, but operations, there's just so much coming in and out and so many things happening.
Yeah.
You got your finger on so many tasks courses that need to be done. We got operations coming up or a rotation happening, so many things. And yeah, you're bound to like make a mistake somewhere along the line. And it's just about being humble and being able to get back up and get back on it.
And you know what? Like that's exactly it, right? Like anything else you do in this building, like leave your ego at the door.
Yeah.
Always learning. You're always going to be a student. And as long as you accept the fact that, like you're human, you're going to make mistakes, but learn from it, meet your commander's intent, and make sure you achieve the end state. Like, it'll work itself out.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd want to advise like junior officers about when it comes to the opso role right now that comes to mind?
Listen to your NCOs. Listen to your NCOs. Learn how to leverage the right people in the building, right? And the way it was the same principle I viewed it when I came in as a platoon commander, right? Like you coming in as the leader, as the officer, you got to look at this almost like a business, right? You're a business owner, and the folks you're coming in with, they're the ones with the experience. You are not going to be the sniper. You are not going to be a pathfinder. You're not going to have, you're not going to be a PI. You're not going to, as an officer, you're not going to be all those things. But what you need to know is who has that expertise. You earn their trust. You earn their respect. You get that confidence, and you learn how to pull those levers so that when you make a plan, it's collaborative, and you know how to leverage training from those who have the experience around you.
Yeah, right on. And like by principle, that's essentially just leadership right there.
Yeah.
Just being a good leader helps you be a good opso.
Yeah.
I found that networking and like your relationship management capacity, or however you would like to call it, but your ability to build, develop, and maintain relationships is one of the most underrated skills that you can learn and really exercise in the military and take it out anywhere.
Yeah.
That's one of the most valuable kind of skills to have, arguably even more than like subject matter skills sometimes,
100%.
I found that as a leader in trying to bring the best out of my guys and cover off on vulnerabilities was to really apply myself in managing the relationship dynamics, because if your people trust you, they believe in you, they will go outside of their way to make things happen for you. And that can pay off in so many dividends, especially when you're looking after a battalion.
Yeah.
So when I didn't really get to meet you, sir. I kind of saw you in the corner, we'd be in the mess in good old SMP in the United Kingdom. But, for everyone tracking here, we were, myself and Captain Segu were both deployed on Op Unifier. He was rotation 16 and I was rotation 17. Right. So he was outgoing, I was incoming. Didn't really get a chance to know you. I believe you're a company 2IC.
That's right.
Right on. How did you find that deployment for yourself?
It was gratifying, and it was interesting for a number of reasons, right? So gratifying because I had done an Op Unifier before, so this is my second time doing it.
Wow, where'd you go? Was it in actual Ukraine?
It was, yeah. I deployed on Roto 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, so this was my second time on a Unifier, and what was interesting, right? Because we went from really seeing the difference from Roto 4 to Roto 16, right? We went from, obviously being in country, the role I was doing at the time on Roto 4, I took my platoon, embedded it inside a Ukrainian company, and we were training together, right? Like we were out in the bush, we were training together, got to do a live fire platoon attack with BMP-1s, like it was wicked, right? Compare that to Roto 16, where obviously, the situation has changed, that was post-invasion. And what we were doing is, like I said, I think it's one of the most gratifying things you can do, because it's the most direct effort that you can have as a conventional force in enhancing Ukrainian security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I had an incredible opportunity and a very significant development for myself. I spent most of my career being an instructor, and now I felt like this was the best teaching experience that I had, being in that kind of position, working with these folks and really having a meaningful effect towards the outcome of their future.
Yeah.
And because this is like life or death more than it is about being successful in a career,
100%.
type of thing. With that being said, sir, like you were the company 2IC in that role. Do you want to talk about that role? Would you like to have any advice for anybody if they find themselves as a company 2IC in a deployed context or anything?
Yeah. So company 2IC was a very interesting time. Like I loved it. right? Because
Can you explain what you do?
yeah, so as a company 2IC, other than you're second in command of the company, you're the principal staff officer reporting to the officer commanding, right? And you got to be ready to step up in case the officer commanding is unavailable at the time. And typically, what you would do as a company 2IC in a tactical context is work with the company quartermaster in exercising the echelon system, like you fight the echelon. In garrison, you're responsible for the day-to-day administration of the company and making sure working with the CQ to make sure training and operational objectives are met.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Excuse me. So, sir, like, where'd you grow up?
So I was born in India.
Okay.
Came here.
Me too.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
I was born in New Delhi.
Okay.
Came here when I was 2. Grew up in Whitby, Ontario.
Right on.
Yeah.
And were you living there until you joined the military?
Yeah. So I lived in Whitby. That's where my mom and dad are. Lived there until I was 18, and then after that, I went to university. I went to University of Western Ontario, finished up there, and then took some time off after graduation to work, and I got picked up as a direct entry officer in 2014.
Wow, 2014 got picked up as a direct entry officer.
That's right.
What does that mean, direct entry officer?
So direct entry officer means you already have a university degree. And as compared to folks who go to Royal Military College to do their degree there, what you do essentially is you come in, university degree complete, and you're ready to start your BMOQ, basic military officer qualification.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And how was this experience for yourself, being civilian, university educated, and then now you're direct entry, getting right into the mix of being in the military?
So I loved it for a couple of reasons, right? So like one, I was a couple of years older than like my RMC counterpart. So I found that like having a bit of real life experience and having a little bit of more like maturity, like kind of helped on phase training. But the other reason too is like my degree was already done. And just like for better or for worse, like all of my courses were lined up like back to back with no break in the middle. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So I started my BMOQ in August of 2014. And I was on course for like 15 months straight. Like BMOQ, BMACA, phase 3, phase 4, like all back to back.
Was it still the phase 3 system is when they called it?
Yeah, at the time, yeah. So they were all lined up back to back. And then, we wrapped up in November of 2015. Helped out with the Common Ground course after. And then from there, straight to 3 RCR.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so let's backtrack a little bit here. Like, were you always interested in the military? How did your interest in the military get fostered?
Yeah, so my dad, as a pastime before when he lived in India, he was a mountaineer.
Oh, wow.
Like he climbed the Himalayas, and he at the time, growing up, he would hear all sorts of cool stories about him, climbing mountains with the Indian commandos and stuff. So
that's crazy.
Yes. What? Yeah. So I grew up hearing all these crazy stories, and my dad was an instructor at the High Altitude Warfare Center. He did that.
Wow. And was he like a SME for them, or was he a soldier too?
No. He was a civilian.
Wow.
He was a civilian. He did this like for fun. And
he'd get contracted to go work with them. Kind of. That's so cool.
Growing up, like you'd hear about all these cool stories, and I'm like, man, that's kind of cool. Yeah. Growing up, like I had a keen interest in science and stuff. So originally, like the plan was to go to med school, but
as a true good Indian boy.
Yeah, but yeah, no, like life happens. Got a bit more informed on what that actually entails.
Yeah.
And did some soul searching after graduation, and came to the military. Like even when I wanted to pursue medicine, the end goal was to somehow end up in the military, be it through medicine as a medical officer or something. But as I did more research, as I took my time to understand like what an infantry officer actually does, like okay, that sounds pretty cool.
That's awesome. I wish I was more like into researching about it and being more, I don't know, intelligent before I made the decision, but I learned so much more about the infantry. And what do I mean by this? It's like my perspective of what I have done and the things that we do and are expected to do, I can articulate it in so much of a better fashion now to somebody who's not in the military, to get them to really not only understand but appreciate like what we do and go through to be as capable as we are. And that's the beauty of the magic of the infantry, is that, you know, you don't necessarily come out with these kind of skills that perhaps some other technical trades would have when you get out of the military and apply it in other fields. But I'd argue that the infantry is the best place to learn entrepreneurial skills. Right? Of how to organize and do project management and achieve mission success. And that's such a vague term, but there's so many things that go on to making things happen that you learn, especially when you're in an operations role, right?
Yes.
But making things happen. And I love to like tell my guys in the battalion, you know, like we are the entrepreneurs of the battlefield. We are solution oriented problem solvers.
Yes. And the advice I'd give to anyone in the infantry, the combat arms, you know, who is releasing, like, you know, the way to really frame what you do, like, you know what your trade is? Your trade is leadership. Like, that's what we do.
Yeah.
You know, we lead the fight. When you look at it in a battle group, in a combat team context, like, we lead the fight.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And everything we do, doesn't matter what your job is, but as long as you're wearing this uniform, you're in the infantry, like, that's what you're doing.
Yeah,
just training to be.
It's incredible. Like I've seen no-hook privates demonstrate leadership capacity to a level beyond people that I've known for so long in my life.
And you probably saw this firsthand on Unifier Roto 17. Like on 16 with us, like some of the work that I saw from the pre-PLQ privates was like, I was blown away.
Yes.
And like what we were doing on that deployment by giving those soldiers the opportunity to train is like really what we were doing is creating the next generation of sergeants.
Yes.
And wards.
Yes. I have, and I'm thankful because a lot of those guys are in my company, my platoon.
Yeah.
So I know that I can rely on them and I know that they're so capable. So that deployment, I'm so happy that I got to go do that because it really made me appreciate all the guys I work with that are my no-hook privates especially. There's so much value that they bring to the table beyond just, you know, that little lane that we expect them to fill, but very capable young men. And in our particular case, and yeah, like even today, I'm like, gentlemen, like we have 1 hour.
Yeah.
All right. So how are we going to use it? And you get some ideas coming out. I'm like, damn right. All right, let's go do it. I know you did that in England. You were doing urban operations training with Ukrainians without being an urban operations instructor, and the pollination and the reps you have of doing this. Go deliver it to our young bucks right here. Just right here in the lines. And let me know if you need anything. And boom, able to get it done.
And you know what's funny is like, I think for you guys on Roto 17, you guys did something very interesting for your pre-deployment training is you took candidates from Meaford practice training. Like when I heard you were doing that, I was like, man, that's fit.
So I don't know how that happened. Right. They just showed up in my reality of what was going on PET. They just showed up. I was CQ2IC. So you know, they showed up. But do you know the story behind how that happened? Was it an ops thing? Like someone put in a request?
So I wasn't, obviously I wasn't in the building at the time.
Yeah.
But typically the way something like that would work out, there would be some sort of service level agreement between 4 CDTC, 3 RCR, and 2 Brigade, and understanding that like, hey, listen, there's a return on investment here in bringing these. Get some good training and, you know, we'll smash out some pre-deployment training as well.
Yeah, we all love that experience. It's actually interesting. Like other organizations do something similar. Like when you have a special operations unit bring in GDs to come act as a partner for us, we're essentially doing something similar. But we have this capacity to provide a quality of training that's realistic for our members by doing these creative ideas. And like it comes as an idea, and then you give it to the ops cell to make it happen. You know. And so it's a very interesting thing that if anybody's listening and you want to put on an interesting experience for your soldiers to understand what it's like to teach a foreign military, go get some like recruits. And if you can, put in the request in advance and try to make it happen in a reasonable time frame. But the DP1 candidates that came through provided all our junior instructors a good opportunity to work with people who don't have a skill in what they're trying to teach them in.
Yeah.
And I think that helped a lot. Yeah, that's awesome. So you joined in 2014. You do the direct entry program.
That's right.
The infantry, like why the infantry though? I might have missed this part, but did you say why the infantry?
So why the infantry? Because I've read what the infantry did. I read what armor did. I read what artillery did. Did a bit of research on the history of each of the three, and to me, jumping out of airplanes sounded pretty cool.
Yeah, right on.
To lead soldiers and to do what infantry does.
Okay.
Destroy the enemy.
Airborne.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. So, how'd you find your experiences of like now being part of this organization as a young junior officer? Was it what you expected? Was it way more than you thought?
So I will admit, like, going through the training pipeline, my only exposure to the military at the time was the training system, right? So when you go through, like, you're being assessed every day. So coming to a unit, it was a bit of a culture shock, like coming here because like I'd never really seen a line unit before. But I don't just say this, like I hand on heart believe that our unit has some of the best officers and NCOs that this institution has to offer. And the reason I am where I am today is because of the NCOs that mentored me when I first came here. So thankfully coming here, like as a new guy, like, all the warrants, all the sergeants know, like, okay, like new officer, come here, like, and the way you hold up your end of the bargain, like I mentioned before, is you listen.
Mm-hmm.
You listen, you earn their trust, you earn their confidence. And when you make a plan, yes, you're accountable. But what you do is you make a collaborative plan.
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting dynamic between the platoon 2IC and the new, and I'm going to use the term junior officer because every platoon commander is like 99% of the time a junior officer. You get the odd 1% CFRs, but we won't talk about those on this episode. But yeah, it's such an influential period of time. I remember dealing with so many guys, and you have so much responsibility trusted into you as a junior officer. And on top of that, like you're where you're headed in your next bounds is just going to be more responsibility with more of an influence or control over a larger group of people and, accomplishing tasks and stuff like that. And I find that you learn a lot of skills in terms of managing relationships when you're a junior officer because you're in the gauntlet with the troops like right away. So whatever the platoon task is, the junior officer is very much involved in making it happen and being on the ground with the troops.
Yeah.
Whereas the higher up you go, you get a little bit more further removed from being right on the front line in the trenches, but still a significant role. But the junior officer, it takes, and I argue as an NCO, it is our responsibility to be as patient and as articulate and as supportive as possible to enable the mentorship and the growth of the junior officer.
Yeah.
And until it changes, we can expect ourselves to see young junior officers coming out of the training system with only course level experiences. And typically speaking, you play such a significant role as an NCO in their development.
Yeah.
And so for all my guys listening out here and all my junior ranks out here and who aspire to be NCOs, like your relationship dynamic with the officers is very valuable. So start working on your skills now, my fellow junior NCOs out there that are going to be sergeants soon, and my buddies that are sergeants right now, because I'm topped as a Course 2IC, and I'm talking to like my Corso all the time already to make sure that we can plan the best course. Because if we put all that energy into planning, we'll probably have a higher probability of success for executing it.
Yeah.
And it's great. We just bounce ideas off each other. We have a very informal relationship kind of concept where we're very chill with each other. It doesn't have to be very formal. Yes, sir. No, sir. But being comfortable talking to each other is a big part of developing the relationship and putting that trust in each other.
Absolutely.
But I've been talking like crazy right now. Let's go back to your story.
Yeah.
So you get in as a junior officer, and where do you report to? You come straight to 3RCR?
Came straight to 3RCR.
Where'd you go?
I came to my company.
All right.
There. So came to my company as a platoon commander. I was one platoon commander.
Hey.
And it was a good time. And, at the time, so like the 2016 era, right? So that was, right before, the year before 3RCR went to Unifier. So we had some great opportunities to do some training. Like we did some training with the 82nd Airborne, went down to Fort Bragg, did some level 5 live fire here, yeah, like it was a good time. And then
And level 5 is always in the context of battalion.
no, it's level 5 is company plus enabler. So in light infantry context, it would be a company plus attachments.
Not combat team though, right?
So if it was to be combat team, it would be company with, technically it would be tanks. Yeah.
Okay, right on. All right, so basically that kind of level of company plus enablers.
Yeah.
Right on. That's wild. Good times.
Yeah. So yeah, like had a couple of years to do some really, really good training. Did Maple Resolve as a platoon commander. And then after that, we actually went down to JRTC. So
The first group.
yeah, so we went down. We were paired under 1st of 1501, 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 82nd Airborne, and yeah, like it was a great experience.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What did you like about being down in the States, like working with them?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah. Anything that comes to mind when you think about like why you loved it?
So I'll never forget my first time seeing a full-scale brigade level joint forcible entry. So a joint forcible entry is a typical airborne seize and hold, right? It's when you drop paratroopers to seize an airstrip so that follow-on forces can land on that airstrip and carry on follow-on actions, right? So we did our progression jumps. Sorry, this was going back to the JOAX before the JRTC, and
Which is a big airborne exercise.
yes, exactly, yeah. And we did our 2 progression day jumps, jumping out of Globemasters and T11, which is the American chute. But the night jump was the insertion into the exercise, and yeah, like I'll never forget that feeling of walking out in full kit, seeing like a handful of Globemasters, a handful of Hercs parked on the tarmac outside of Green Ramp, and getting on that airplane and inserting into the exercise with a night jump with hundreds of other paratroopers in 5-6 ship formation drops.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like I get fired up when I see like a section plus following me out of the fucking plane, But when you see a battalion, a brigade
Yeah.
jumping in the sky and like vehicles being dropped
Yeah.
and like guys getting injured and red glow stars going around, but troopers on the ground hitting the objective and that mass, it really shows you the might of the war machine.
Yeah. And what's funny is like, so for us, we don't typically practice at that skill. The skill really hits you when you get on the ground, and like soldiers are lost looking for the wrong DZRV. It's like, what do you mean the wrong DZRV? There are hundreds of DZRVs out there. Like you got to find the right one. But, it was interesting. And, after that, we rolled into an air assault after that as well with Blackhawks, and it was good to go. But going back to JRTC, like that was also a very, very valuable experience in that, we were a company embedded in an American battalion. So, not only, were we resourced to fight and do the business, but probably some of the best live fire training I've ever done.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's one of the great things about collaborating with other militaries is that we get to do some opportunities that, sometimes don't happen as often over here at that level or magnitude, we should say, because there is something cool about, in our, like my experiences, seeing the back of a ramp of a helicopter and seeing like a battalion of armored movement below you, on the ground, and you're like, wow, I only get to really live in my little bubble 95% of the time in the military, and then like for 5% of it I get to be and see the war machine at play and like all gears running. It's awesome. I had an interesting experience on like my Maple Resolve in 2014, and I was a PSYOPs team 2 IC, but we were in the rear area with 2 RCR embedded with them. But just to speak to the magnitude, it's like we were dealing with the rear area issues, and one of them being like essentially paramilitary groups and insurgency. Right. So while the 1st and 3rd battalions of the RCR are engaged with their counterpart near peer enemies up on the front lines, which are the Vandus at the time, we were dealing with the insurgency in the rear area. So as we were getting in firefights at our FOB, there are Chinooks flying like really close over our heads heading to the front lines. And we're like, wow, like we're waging our battle back here, but there's another massive one happening downrange that way, and it's only going to expand further and further the AO as we keep pushing the enemy.
And you're getting me all fired up here.
Man, I get gung ho, you know. I fucking don't always get excited, you know.
After it again.
Yeah, you know. But it's good though. It's good to like get out of that being just in a very tactical position, getting into these very administrative. Well, I don't want to just call it administrative positions, but you know, going into these headquarters positions, and then coming back. Right, there's a lot of that back and forth pollination.
Yeah.
And I think there's some good things about going from that environment to that environment. And, you know, I got like this kind of idea of explaining it when I talk to my young troops. I'm like, there's two real sides of the army. There's the field force and then there's corporate army. And I think corporate army doesn't do it justice, because corporate army isn't like the lame place to go be at. No, corporate army is where a lot of things are being done to look after the administration, to make sure that we can go do the things on the field force.
Yeah.
Right? The coordinating, the planning, the logistical support at the higher levels, I guess, and organizing all the things that we need.
Yeah. So you just hit the nail on the head with something that's like pretty common in the officer world as well, right? Like everyone wants to command. We all want to get after it. We want to do the business. But there is a necessary evil, and that's working as a staff officer. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, the staff stream is where you learn how to fight the mechanisms of the institution. Learn how to not resource the task. Correction, don't task the resource, but you learn to resource the task. Right. And what I mean by that is you learn what levers to pull, you learn what mechanisms to go after to make sure that you can do the hands and feet skills.
Well said, sir. I also have heard another person, you know, in the military said to me, and I don't remember if they were like a major or what, but anyways, I digress. What they were saying was that they think that there could be three kind of streams where you could progress. And this may apply for both NCMs and officers, but you have like the tactical side of the house where you'll find, you know, your platoons, your companies, your battalions. You have this other kind of stream where it's like the command side, where you're invested into leadership positions. And then there's another stream, which is what they call the staff side, where there's lots of people that are in the military. There's a lot of hardworking, intelligent, very dedicated members in the military who just, you know, sometimes I find myself not being the most tactically savvy person, but these people are excellent at getting that staff work done like assassins and ninjas themselves, you know, and God bless them, because these are the people who are looking after promotions. They're looking after your release. They're looking after disciplinary shit. You know, they're looking after like all of this admin, right? And especially when I think about, you know, promotions for my guys, honors and awards for my guys, looking after their transition out of the military for my guys. Like, you know, these staff officers are the ones who are really administering that, or making sure it's being administered properly, right? And so I don't know if you agree with this concept of like a tactical stream, a command stream, or a staff stream, but it's interesting to see that there are some people, some personality types are better suited maybe for this type of work versus that type of work, but we're all the same team.
Yeah.
And we all enable each other.
Yeah. So like you're not wrong, right? So whether it's command, whether it's staff, you know, whether you're assaulter, operator, like, you know, like we in the infantry, everyone wants to be a ground pounder. We all want to jump out of planes. We want to do the business, right? But command and staff, you can't do one without the other, right? You want to jump out of planes, you want to shoot guns, great. Guess what? In order for that to happen, like there are still functions that need to happen. Like you need to organize training. You need to synchronize, you know, training calendars. You need to, you know, make sure, you know, you're exercising your delegations of authority, right? Like all those things, the institutional mechanisms still need to happen, right? And I found that it wasn't really until I left 3RCR on my first ERE, my external regimental employment, like once I was done my platoon and my combat support platoon command time, that, you know, I got out of here and I worked at CJOC headquarters for a little bit. And that's really when you really take a step back and you get kind of the bird's eye view at the institution, working at the operational and like the strat level as well. What you do is you really understand that, like, you know, like I said, we all want to do the hands and feet stuff, but there is a necessary function that needs to make that CDS's intent, and you have to translate that strategic intent into tactical effect. And the way that happens is through the staff stream.
Oh, that's well said.
Yeah.
Sir, that's interesting. So you got to go work at CJOC as well?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about what CJOC is and like what kind of role and stuff is like? What's going on at CJOC? What is that?
So CJOC, the Canadian Joint Operations Command, is a force employer, right? So the Army is a force generator. CJOC is a force employer. So when let's say like someone from the Army gets sent over to Op Reassurance, right? That mission falls under Commander CJOC, and CJOC is the one that manages named conventional expeditionary operations and some domestic operations as well.
Right on.
And CJOC it's a massive headquarters. It's what's called an L1, and what they do is they manage missions at home and abroad.
Okay, right on. What was interesting is my last deployment experience.
Yeah.
I assumed, and you might have to correct me, but I assumed that every mission would be under CJOC, but actually there's only one exception from what I understand. It's the Roto Zeros. And it was like, who the fuck was it that explained it to me? I don't remember, but it was a credible person. It was a credible person, I swear. But they were like, yes, the one CAD, not one CAD, the 1st Canadian Division.
So 1 Canadian Division falls under CJOC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So CJOC is still the force employer. 1 Canadian Division falls under CJOC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And the other force employer is Kansofcom. So Kansofcom is its own force generator and force employer. So they got their own folks. They send them overseas to do high speed stuff, right?
Right.
But for the conventional forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, we fall under CJOC. And whether it's Roto Zero, whether it's Roto whatever, like CJOC, Commander CJOC owns that.
So at the end of the day, no matter what the mission is or how long it is, everything is under CJOC's umbrella in terms of what's happening expeditionary or domestically.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. And so how this works is what CJOC will task, like, I don't want to get into the whole weeds of it, but the 1st Canadian Division is a formation that is set up to lead.
Yeah, so 1st Canadian Division it's a division, and some of the things that they specialize in is so when OPSAVAN happened, right? That was a non-combatant evacuation operation. NEOS is something 1 CAD handles, right? Or sorry, not 1 CAD, sorry, 1 Div handles, right? And what they do is they liaise very closely with Global Affairs Canada, GAC, in situations where, if we need to retrograde civilians or Canadian titled personnel out of hotspots, that's where that function would come in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. Thank you for explaining
Yeah.
that. So, sir, being in the military now, you hit going on the 11-year mark now?
Yeah, so I hit 10 years of service this past summer.
Hey, right on.
Yeah.
So with all this time that goes by, what are your favorite memories?
I will never forget, my first day at the Mega at CFLRS.
Shit.
I'll never forget that. I'll never forget.
Why is that? What happened?
Oh, it was just the scale. It's the scale of the building, and it's just when you see you see your staff out there, they're forming everyone up in 3 ranks. Everyone's getting jacked up. This is happening. This is real. Another, some good memories, obviously from phase training, the good old defensive march you do at 2 a.m, halfway through the defensive where you're falling asleep walking, it's great times. Phase training, I had a great time, right? We had a pretty close crew, and it was hard doing that training back to back, but it was some of the best fun I never want to have again. But outside of that, being at 3 RCR and just even on deployment and stuff, great memories, right? Doing the airborne stuff, that was great. And just even on deployment, some of the most gratifying work was, working with Ukrainian soldiers, training them, and having that, that firsthand chance to, help train them, on 2 different rotos. And same goes, I deployed on Op Unifier in 2019 as well. That was very interesting. Got to work in the headquarters. Great experience there. Learned lots. Got to travel around, see some of the Middle East there. And I did one Dom op in 2021, I believe it was, on Op Vector.
Oh,
That was
Vector.
that was
Okay, right on.
international.
So, when I like to ask guests, or what I like to ask guests, is that the idea of people who may have played a role in your development. You've mentioned your father, and that seems like he, was a big part of inspiring you to think about the military from a very young age. Were there other people, or are there other people that come to mind that have played a role in your joining the military or helping you become who you are today?
So 100%, like my dad, 100%, and like my family, right? Like my family writ large, super supportive and helping me get to and really shaping me to be the person I am today. But professionally, from a military point of view, like I look at the officers and NCOs, specifically the NCOs, that when you do something you shouldn't be doing, or like see something like that's it's having the nuance to be like, hey sir, come here, like this is what you may want to consider doing this next time. And really what you got to understand is when those NCOs are mentoring you, it's like they do that because they care. If they didn't care, they would just let you fail.
Right.
And to that end, like I credit like my platoon warrants, the sergeants I was around with as a platoon commander, and where I am today, like it is a direct reflection of their mentorship.
Since your time when you came in, I believe all those NCOs have probably moved on to become, whether they're sergeants or warrants, or probably MWOs, if not higher now.
Yeah.
Would you like to give a shout out to anybody in particular that like really played a big role in helping you out?
There's a handful. So RSM 1RCR, Chief Warrant Officer McGlynn,
Oh yeah,
platoon warrant.
really?
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is my first platoon warrant.
Shout out to the RSM of 1RCR. He's a big supporter of this podcast.
Yeah. MWO Kersey Vong, like super supportive, like great mentor, learned a lot.
Is he over at 1RCR now too?
Yeah.
Okay, right on.
MWO Pension, he was my platoon warrant. MWO Strickland, who's my ops MWO right now. And we were on Unifier together as well. We had a long history of working together. So just and I had MWO Hatcher as well as one of my platoon warrants.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So
Right on.
lots of good NCOs that that helped mentor me along the way. Oh, and of course, like MWO Muhammad, like
Can't forget the legend.
can't forget that. Yeah.
Oh, what a character!
Yeah.
I can't wait to have him on the interview.
Oh man.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. Were these all people like you mentioned? Was it your time in Para Company where you met a lot of them?
So yeah, it was around. Yeah, it was in Para Company. Like when I was a platoon commander. The reason I specifically mentioned those names is when like, you're a new guy, like first 2 years of battalion, like you're learning.
No.
And like as the more time you get in, the more reps you get in, like you either get better or you get less worse, depending on how you want to frame it, right? But it really is to the credit of those NCOs that, like I said, they have the tact and the deportment and the patience really
Yeah.
to say like, hey sir, like may want to consider this next time. And if you're intelligent and like you have any shred of emotional intelligence, you'll take note of that and you'll learn from your mistake.
Yeah. For any new people listening, just to understand sometimes the difference in like experiences, like, where I'm at in my career and where my platoon commander is in their career, like I'm going on 16 years of service with 4 operations under my belt, so when you look at your NCOs, you're dealing with somebody who's probably has at least double, if not 3 to 4 times the amount of time you have in the military. So there is just that statistic to consider as well of, maybe this person has a lot of experience or at least some experience in what we're about to do or what I have on my plate to accomplish. And so it's always something good to do as a leader in general, is to know your limitations and work with your team to try to achieve it and cover off the vulnerabilities that you identify and stuff. Can I ask you something? Can I ask you, like, is there any quotes that like, or mantras or something like that, about leadership or anything like that you think about or comes to mind?
There's a book called Zen in the Martial Arts. What it's not a long read. And one of the things that really does, hit for me is there's a quote in there, and it comes from an anecdote in that story where, there's 2 martial artists, they're training. One gets jealous of the other and tries to sabotage the other. The mentor takes them aside, and the mentor says to them, he said, instead of trying to sabotage it, extend your lines. Like, what do you mean? It's like, just remember, like, winners, like, losers focus on winners, winners focus on winning. And instead of trying to sabotage your competition, focus on making yourself better.
Mm.
And in my opinion, that's a quote that stood out to me for years, right? And it goes down to a mantra of, in anything we do in the military, right? Like, don't look to your left, don't look to your right, like, to yourself, like, try to be the better version of yourself every day, right? Think about the things you as a human being can improve on. Like, at the baseline, like, be a good human, right? But if you get caught up focusing on what others are doing, you're doing it wrong. Focus on what you're doing. Be better than you were yesterday, and leave your ego at the door. And if you have questions, ask.
Yeah, right on. Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. How do you like to spend your time? Like, do you have hobbies?
Yeah, like if I'm not at work or, if I'm not with my son, then working out.
Yeah, right on.
I try to get on the grappling mats when I can.
Okay.
But this job tends to eat up some of my time.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm not doing that, I'm really into lifting weights.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Sir, I'm gonna leave it with you because I know you have a tight timetable.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to share or talk about that we haven't already discussed?
Yeah. So, like, honestly, to anyone listening, right? Your career in the military is anything what you make of it, right? At the end of the day, like, it's your experience, it's your journey. The opportunities that are here in this institution, like, I know we all like to talk and say things, like, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like, the opportunities that really are here, not just from a professional standpoint, but the opportunities for personal growth, the camaraderie, the friendship, you're not going to find it anywhere else. Like, you really won't. And that's something that I really do hear from a lot of folks who do release is, sometimes the grass looks greener on the other side. Grass is only greener if you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Take advantage of what you have here. There's, even for deployments, there are opportunities coming up. You know what I mean? But deployments aside, like, the training, the fitness, doing the cool hands and feet stuff, the opportunity's there, right? And all it comes down to is just having the right attitude about it. It's never going to be perfect. Take it for what it is, and enjoy the ride.
Sir, thank you for taking the time to share, to talk to us, talk to me, really. Yeah. I hope you had a good time. I would love to have you back on down the road in the future if you're interested.
Absolutely.
There's always so much to share and talk about. And, as our careers progress, there's always going to be some other insights we can share.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this podcast is all about community service and trying to pass on our lessons learned, especially from the mistakes we've made. And especially from how maybe we've accomplished the things we have. And a lot of the times it's from our capacity to manage these relationships of the people that are around us, above us, below us, And so thank you for talking about the importance of relationship dynamics, for explaining about your experiences coming through the training system, your experiences being an operations officer, what makes a good officer and a good person in that kind of position to execute, to be successful. And it was good to hear about your story because I was also born in India too. I came here when I was 1 year old. I ended up moving to Toronto instead of Whitby. But same sometimes in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there you go, man.
But sir, thank you for taking the time. For everybody listening here, this is the Operations Officer of 3RCR, Captain Aman Segu. A veteran, an amazing person, one of the amazing people that we have in this building. And stay tuned. We'll be publishing this episode and future episodes down the road. And if there's any kind of suggestions you guys may have about things you'd like to learn about from the guests, just drop a comment. Thank you, everybody, for your time. And thank you, sir, for your service.
Hey, appreciate having me. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Airborne.
Airborne.